Greetings, Californians. This is why your state is such a mess. This will be kind of a follow-up to a video I did previously, Ever Wonder Why California is Broke? And you'll figure out from this video why California is such a mess. Now, as I go through this, again, all the links, all the relevant links that you can peruse at your leisure will be underneath the video as per usual. And I'll have to admit, I was surprised some of these metrics, California wasn't as bad as the nation en masse. The U.S. has got a lot of cultural problems, a lot of problems with what I would call personal responsibility, rewarding irresponsibility. And California is a microcosm of that. Most states aren't quite as bad, but as you'll see, it's not good in California. But I was surprised that they weren't as bad on some of these metrics. But then there's other metrics where you can say, yeah, that's kind of where they have a problem. So, first thing we're going to cover here, comparison of disability. I've gone over this before in other videos. Just do a search for things like labor force participation rate and Social Security. My Social Security needs to be reformed video covers a lot of this stuff related to disability, the number of people on disability and why. So we got the California population figures up there that you can see, and the percentage and the actual number of people who are under 65. And you can have a lot of times what they require now, let's say you've been on disability since 40. Let's just say you have. You have to do another 2 years after so-called retirement on disability, and then you can go on full retirement on regular Social Security, and you'll be off the disability rolls. So that's why I calculated it as far as under 65 population. So, in the note there, I had to average the above figure for 2015 for California, because I could not find an archive estimate for the number of Californians over 65. So, U.S. disability beneficiaries, over 10 million in 2017. That was equal to 3.54% of the less than 65 U.S. population. And then you have, I drilled down to number of beneficiaries disabled due to, quote, musculoskeletal system and connective tissue. And then you've got so-called mental disorders, and I drill down into that, where you get some of these. This was expanded under Reagan and his Republican Senate and Democrat House. You get some of these so-called psychological disorders, which in a lot of cases are hocus pocus. Childhood and adolescent disorders, not elsewhere classified, is one of them. Mood disorders is another one. And schizophrenic and other psychotic disorders is another one. And I found out a lot of these people who become schizophrenic, you can trace that back to probably not a very good family life and a lot of drug and alcohol abuse as well. So you've got that number. Now, the percentage of people on disability for those above ailments, again, musculoskeletal system and connective tissue, and then so-called mental disorders, which are comprised of childhood and adolescent disorders not elsewhere classified, and mood disorders, and schizophrenic and other psychotic disorders. So I didn't include everything that's a so-called mental disorder. Percentage of people on disability for those above ailments, 47.46%, so almost half. The number of those categories of disability are equal to 1.68% of the under 65 U.S. population. In California, number of people on disability in 2017, 777,363. And then for those specific disorders, again, I won't read this off every time, but just so you get it, the number of people on disability in California for musculoskeletal system and connective tissue and childhood and adolescent disorders not elsewhere classified and mood disorders. I'm depressed. I'm just really depressed. I understand. I get depressed too, but I'm not going to let it ruin my life. And schizophrenic and other psychotic disorders. That's 386,009. And you can see that's higher than the U.S. average as far as the percentage of those on disability for those above ailments, almost 50%, 49.65% to be exact. The number of those categories of disability are equal to 2.21% of the entire California less than 65 population. California's less than 65 population is equal to 12.36% of the entire U.S. less than 65 population. Tables 10 and 10A, that's on the Social Security website. Tables 10 and 10A, those are those specific disorders. This isn't all of them. Again, Table 10 is musculoskeletal system and connective tissue, and 10A is those specific mental disorders I mentioned. So again, Tables 10 and 10A disabled for California is 8.08% of the entire Table 10 and 10A category for the U.S., for these United States, 8.08%. Disability beneficiaries 2016, over 10.1 million in the U.S., that's equal to 3.7% of the under 65 population. Then you've got the specific disorders again, 4,813,962. Percentage of those on disability for the above ailments, 47.41%. Number of those specific categories of disability are equal to 1.75% of the entire U.S. under 65 population. In 2016, in California, almost 800,000 people on disability, 794,651. Those specific disorders from Table 10 and Table 10A equal 396,552 people. Percentage of those on disability for the above ailments, 49.9%. So you can see 2 years in a row, those specific disorders, I got a bad back, oh, I'm depressed, oh, I did a bunch of drugs and now I'm a schizophrenic. The percentage of people on disability for those ailments, again, is higher in California than it is nationally. The number of those categories of disability are equal to 1.16% of the entire California under 65 population. California's under 65 population in 2016 is equal to 12.37% of the entire U.S. under 65 population. Tables 10 and Table 10A disabled for California is 8.23% of the entire Tables 10 and 10A, those specific categories for the U.S. Again, 8.23%. Disability beneficiaries U.S. 2015, 10.2 million. A lot of these, again, are boomers who are actually on retirement, who were on disability for decades. The number on disability is equal to 3.37% of the under 65 U.S. population. Then those specific categories again, musculoskeletal, childhood and adolescent disorders, mood disorders, schizophrenia, etc., 4,841,954. Percent on disability for the above ailments, 47.29%. The number of those categories of disability are equal to 1.76% of the under 65 population in the U.S. California, disability beneficiaries 2015, 809,509. Those specific categories, 404,628. Percent of those on disability for the above ailments, 49.98%. So every year I check, those 3 years, it was higher than the U.S. average for the percentage of those on disability for those specific categories. Again, musculoskeletal system and connective tissue, childhood and adolescent disorders not elsewhere classified, and mood disorders and schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. Number of those categories of disability equal to 1.17% of the entire California under 65 population. California's under 65 population in 2015 was equal to 12.5% of the entire U.S. under 65 population. California is younger than most states as far as its population average age. Tables 10 and 10A, those specific categories for California, is 8.35% of all those for the U.S. So that didn't surprise me. Not at all. A higher percentage of people in California are on disability for those so-called, I would call them, bogus I'm depressed. Oh, my back hurts, but there's no actual x-ray damage or x-ray evidence of a slipped disc or anything. I'm depressed. I'm a schizo, etc. Again, under Reagan, that's when those categories were expanded to allow this flood of people. And again, the reason the number of disability beneficiaries is going down, a lot of them are boomers who are actually on retirement age now. So it's not like it's getting any better. So a lot of these boomers who spent decades on disability, some of them for depression, are now retired. Then you got California per pupil expenditures. This is adjusted for inflation, and as you can see, shockingly, California didn't spend as much as the national average in any of the periods. In 2003-04 through 2005-06, the U.S. average was $10,806. California was $9,863. 2006-07 through 2009-10, U.S. average was $11,570. California, it was $10,536. In the U.S., 2010-11 through 2013 and 14, U.S. average was $11,239. In California, it was $9,713. So some people say, well, gosh, if California just spends a little bit more, when have we heard this? Well, nationally, the per pupil expenditures adjusted for inflation have skyrocketed. Class sizes have dropped. Yet there are a lot of states, and Mississippi, a state I'll go over later, which are a train wreck. So yeah, I bet if California just spends $5,000 or $6,000 more per student, no, I don't think it'll get any better. But that's what they'll be saying. I was surprised at that. California pupil-teacher ratio. Fall 1992 through fall of 1995, California average was 24 pupils per teacher. The U.S. average was 17.35. California fall 2009 through 2011, their average was 22.4. U.S. average was 15.8. California fall 2012 through 2014, California average 23.8. U.S. average 16. School year 2015-2016, California average was 23.6. U.S. average was 16. So California has much larger class sizes compared to the rest of the U.S. And again, they'll say, well, if we bring it down, well, since the 50s and 60s, nationally, class sizes have dropped precipitously. But yet, specifically with blacks and Hispanics in a lot of areas, the public school system is still failing them. So throwing more money at it in smaller class sizes hasn't helped. Pupils per staff ratio. California 2009 through 2011 average was 11.23 pupils per staff member. The U.S. average is 7.96. California 2012 through 2014, pupils per staff 11.43, U.S. average 8.06. So California has a lot more pupils per staff member. The U.S. average is about 8. That means that an average school, you line up 8 students and there's 1 staff member per kid. It's almost like the Postal Service. They're almost overstaffed. Teachers as a percentage of staff in public elementary and secondary school systems. California fall 2009 through 2011, 50% were teachers, 50% were not, and the U.S. average was 50.36, so California is really close there. California fall 2012 through 2014, teachers as a percentage of staff, 47.86%, the U.S. average was 50.2%. So California's got a lot of non-teaching staff in their schools, and the U.S. overall does. Percentage of public school students. This is one that will not surprise you. It did not surprise me. Listen carefully. Percentage of public school students participating in English language learner programs. California 2009 through 2011, 23.63% of their public school students were participating in English language learner programs. 23.63%. The U.S. average is 9.1%. And if you look through all the links, I didn't include this, you'll see that the federal government's sending California hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to help teach what are likely, in a lot of cases, illegal aliens teaching them English. So California wants to flood their state with illegal aliens, and they want taxpayers in Iowa and Michigan and Pennsylvania to pay to teach them English. California 2012 through 2014 average, 22.63% of public school students were participating in English language learner programs. 22.63%. U.S. average was 9.3%. California has a huge contingent of students who do not know English. Great. And you get to pay for it even if you don't even want to visit California. Now we've got National Assessment of Educational Progress reading scales, reading scale scores, 4th and 8th graders. This didn't surprise me. California 4th graders, and these are English language learners. California 4th graders, English language learners, at or above basic was 27% reading scale scores. Again, California 4th grade English language learners, at or above basic, 27%. U.S. average was 32%. At or above proficient, 6%. U.S. average was 8%. California 4th graders, not English language learners, at or above basic, 71% in California. Look at the big gap between at or above basic for English language learners and not. No wonder so many, and you'll see so many Hispanic students are failing in these California public schools. They don't care. They don't care. California 4th graders, not English language learners, at or above basic, 71%. U.S. average, 72%. At or above proficient, 36%. U.S. average, 38%. California 8th graders, English language learners, at or above basic, 21%. U.S. average, 28%. At or above proficient, only 2%. U.S. average is 3%. California 8th graders, not English language learners, at or above basic, 78%. U.S. average, 78%. At or above proficient, 33%. U.S. average, 35%. So since California has a huge contingency of English language learners, no wonder the reading scores are lagging out there, because the not English language learners are tracking fairly close to the U.S. average. But the English language learners are not so much. And since they have a lot more of them, that's going to create more problems, especially if they drop out of school. Number and percentage of homeless students enrolled in public elementary and secondary schools. 2009-2010 school year through 2014-2015 school year, but note I am excluding 2014-2015 because of changes to California's data collection systems. California average 2009-10 through 2013-2014. This is the percentage of homeless students enrolled in public schools. The California average was 3.78% were homeless. The U.S. average for the same time frame, 2009-2010 through 2013-2014, 2.24%. California is substantially higher. Percentage of persons 18 to 24 years old and age 25 and over, but we're just going to focus on high school, by educational attainment. This is just 23 specific years, 2000, 2014, and 2015. Note, high school completion includes equivalency programs such as a GED. So California, less than high school completion, 2000, 23.2%. In California, the U.S. average was 19.6%. California, less than high school completion, 2014, 17.9%. U.S. average, 13.1%. California, less than high school completion, 2015, 17.8%. U.S. average was 12.8%. So California is way behind the U.S. there. In 2015, and if you look at this data, all groups in California do well compared to U.S. averages, except for Hispanics. They do very poorly. In 2015, 38.3% of Hispanics did not complete high school in California. In all other ethnic groups, white, black, Asian, California's average was above the national average as far as people completing high school. It was the same case in 2014. 39.1% of Hispanics did not complete high school in California. All other ethnic groups were above the national average as far as people completing high school. So as far as the U.S. average, all ethnic groups do well in California except Hispanics, which they have a high population of, and a lot of them have to learn English, so you can see why California is in deep trouble there. Here we go. Number or percentage of public school students eligible for free or reduced price lunch by state. Selected years. The selected years are 2000, 2001, 2010, 2011, 2013-14 school year, and 2014-2015 school year. And note, the National School Lunch Program has a huge error rate. California average for those years, this is again 2000, 2001, 2010, 2011, 2013, 2014, and the 2014-2015 school year, California average for those years, 54.375%, so well over half of all California students are getting a free or reduced lunch, and with the huge error rate that there is in that program, likely a lot of them are getting it when they don't qualify. 54.375%. The U.S. average was 47.55%. So apparently California has a lot more poor people getting a free or reduced lunch. A lot of these progressives ridicule the South as a bunch of toothless knuckleheads that are all poor. Apparently there's a lot of that in California. I'm not going to read all this off. Total and current expenditures per pupil in fall enrollment in public schools. And then we've got California's, I've got a selected bunch of years there, California instruction spending as a percentage of all spending. That's another thing where states will spend a lot on an education budget, but in a lot of cases, not even half of it goes for instruction. And California's average has increased in recent years from a low of 49.59% of all spending as going to instruction, so-called instruction, up to 52.13%. But they were always below the U.S. average every single year, and even the U.S. average in the final year was only 54.52%. So when you've got roughly 46% of all education spending not going to instruction, you might have a problem. But again, California's has risen in recent years, but at the highest it ever got, 52.13%. So they've still spent roughly 48%, 47.87% to be exact, education spending that is not instruction. Births to unmarried women by race and Hispanic origin of mother. California average for 2010 through 2017. Births to unmarried women. The percentage of births to unmarried women, California average 2010 through 2017, 39.25%. Remember, California has an incredibly high Hispanic population as a percentage of the entire population. For those years, California Hispanic births to unmarried women, 2010 through 2017, 52.8%. So a lot of fragmented Hispanic families in California. And believe it or not, for blacks, it was below the national average. California black, 2010 through 2017, births to unmarried women, only 66.85%, which is lower than the national average, which shows you there are a lot of fragmented black families out there. And that's why a lot of the kids are behind the eight ball when daddy's not around. And I don't know, is that my fault? I suppose it's my fault. California white, 2010 through 2017, births to unmarried women, 23.58%. Again, the cumulative California average from 2010 through 2017 was only 39.25%. The U.S. average was 40.36%. We have a problem. Houston, we have a huge death of the nuclear family problem. And that's your fault. That's your fault. If you're a taxpayer that's responsible, planned your family, or maybe you didn't even have a family. Maybe you're married with no children. If you're responsible, that's your fault. Homicide rates per 100,000. Believe it or not, California was not an outlier. Homicide rates per 100,000. California 2012 through 2017 average 4.71 homicides per 100,000. U.S. average 2012 through 2017 4.86 homicides per 100,000. So despite all this gun control in California, their homicide rate when compared to the U.S. average is not uber low. Weapons used in homicides. Note, for California data, they calculated it for homicides where they knew the weapon used and excluded homicides where the weapon was unknown. I calculated it with unknown weapons included, so if it's unknown, I counted it as a non-firearm. California 2012 through 2017. Percentage of homicides perpetrated with a quote-unquote firearm, 69.59%. So even in big gun control California, over 40%, or over 30%, of all homicides, a firearm doesn't even need to be used. USA 2012 through 2017, percentage of homicides perpetrated with a firearm, 70.41%. So more homicides in California are committed without a firearm needed than nationally, although it's not an incredibly large difference. This is one that's another huge problem. STD infection rates. Now, you have the right to go out and be promiscuous if you want, but don't come crying to me or begging me or demanding money from me if you get an STD or you get HIV or AIDS. Do I want you to die? No, but I'm not going to spend a dime on you, and nor should I, if you're that stupid to go have unprotected sex. And again, as I've gone over in one of my videos, what would happen if Democrats treated homosexuals like they treat gun owners and taxpayers? STDs are running rampant in the homosexual community, mainly. Not that heteros don't pass around diseases too, but it is mainly a homosexual phenomenon, especially AIDS. But California STD infection rates. For 1996 through 2014, the infection rates per 100,000 for chlamydia, gonorrhea, and then primary and secondary syphilis. California, the average 1996 through 2014 was 143.54 per 100,000. U.S. average for the same time frame, 152.75 per 100,000. So California STD problem is not as high as the U.S. STD problem, but that doesn't mean it's hunky-dory. California was higher than the national average for chlamydia and syphilis, but lower for gonorrhea. That was 1996 through 2014. Now, California primary and secondary syphilis rates, 2015-2016, 13.75. Chlamydia rates, 2015-2016, 494.75. California gonorrhea rates, 2015-2016, 151.6 per 100,000. So, their cumulative 2015-2016 average, 220.03, which is much, much higher than their 143.54 average from 96 to 2014. So it's not getting better. HIV infection rates in California, 2008 through 2015, 16.1 per 100,000. So that does it for this video. May have been boring and dry, but there's a lot of good factoids that kind of figure out why the U.S. is heading in the wrong direction culturally. I'm not saying you should be forced into a certain marriage or forced to act a certain way or forced to have one sex partner, but when you utilize the freedom to engage in some dangerous lifestyle decisions, you should have to pay the price for that, and I shouldn't have my wallet pilfered for it. If you're irresponsible, sometimes it doesn't end well, and if you go out and you're promiscuous and you get HIV and it turns into full-blown AIDS, that's not my fault. So, hopefully you got something out of this video. You can see why California is heading in the wrong direction, and the U.S. as a whole. California has some major problems, and I don't know if they're going to get it fixed. I think eventually they'll be begging for bailouts from Washington, and they should not be given bailouts. They should deal with it themselves. You've been warned. Have a nice day, and don't thank me now for the bad news.